So this is our last class meeting, our last video lecture before you have to take your test 2. Okay, so I've got test 2 almost ready. As soon as my classes are over this morning, which is 10:40 is when I get out of my last morning class, I'm going to go to my office and lock my door and put the test on Blackboard. Part of it's already there, you just can't see it yet. I just have to add the essay question part to it because it's just exactly formatted exactly the way that test 1 was. So you've got the multiple choice questions. I think I've got more multiple choice questions on this test. I think you only had 25 multiple choice questions on the first test, and I think I put 50 on this one at 1 point each, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, you will find out as soon as you log into it. I have it set exactly the way test 1 was, so that you can access it as many times as you would like and work on it periodically until the due time, which is going to be Sunday night at 9 p.m. Okay, and that will be clearly stated on the link, to the test. But please don't wait until Sunday to access it for the first time. Access it today and have a look at it, so that you can know what kind of time you want to schedule, and submit it as early in our window of opportunity to submit it as possible, because if you have some kind of technical glitch, you can only submit it one time. You can access it and save your progress and close it and come back to it later. But if you hit submit, you can only submit it one time. So if there's a technical glitch for you that happens when you hit submit, if you wait until the last possible moment on Sunday night, that's not anything I can intervene about and fix for you. So please make sure that you submit it as soon as you can, and because that'll just give me more of an opportunity to help out if there, and I don't anticipate technical glitches, I hope not, but if there's, I've had some people call me, not this semester, but some people call me saying, please reopen it for me, my electricity went out or something, right? Those kinds of things I can help with, if you give me time, right? I can't help you with it if it's 8:59 p.m. on Sunday night, but I can if it's 11 a.m. on Friday morning, for instance, within that window. Okay, so any questions or anything about the test? This is Unit 2, so 4 through 6. Not all the pages, I don't remember off the top of my head what pages I assigned for you in 4 and 5. I think all of Chapter 6 was part of it, but that picture or that announcement is still in Blackboard for you, if you don't know. Okay, so anything else before we get started on Symbolic Interactionism and Deviance today? Anybody? I'm not sure if we will need the whole class period, probably, because, y'all would be shocked if I let you out early, right? So I probably will extend this for the whole class period, but we have two topics. There's kind of like 2 subtopics that we're going to discuss within one of the topics today, but we're back to the micro level discussion of society and social life, which, based on your reaction papers from last week, a lot of y'all really liked the microscale discussion, the social script kind of discussion, and how we have accountability to the members of our primary groups especially, but secondary groups also. So today, we're going to transition from the functionalist standpoint, which is macroscale, the conflict standpoint, which is macroscale, which the last 2 class periods have been about regarding deviance. And now we're going to look at symbolic interactionism, the microscale aspects of deviance in society. Okay? So, let's just get, not with that marker. I hope all of them aren't dried up. Should I try? Should I try to make that thing back there? Dominique is like, let me get out of the way. Y'all want me to try it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Woo! No. Dominique, would you throw that away for me, please? Or thank you, Kayla. That was so white lady. I'm sorry. That was not good at all. So anyway, okay. So let me try this one. Hopefully I've got a good marker. Yes, this one has some juice in it. Okay. Yes, symbolic interactionism is what we were going to talk about. Symbolic interactionism and deviance. Okay? Symbolic interaction and deviance. So, as I just said, symbolic interactionism is a microscale perspective. So now we can come back from this macro scale point of view we've been using, and we can look at the way people live out their lives on a daily basis, and how and when and why deviance might become part of somebody's behavior profile, to use a criminal justice word, based on the interactions we have with the people that we are around every single day. Okay? Because that's how symbolic interactionists look at society. Now, I know society is a macro scale word, right? And interactionism has this word interaction in it, which is the you and me thing, right? And symbols, how do we interpret symbols? We're going to talk about that today. I've got a picture of a tattoo, a guy with a tattoo, or a gal. I don't really know if it's a guy or a gal. And we're going to talk about how symbols, give us messages, but we're going to do this underneath the umbrella topic of deviance. Yes, bless you. Okay. So, microscale sociologists, people who use symbolic interactionism, they look at the you and me level, but they do it to try to see the reflection of macro scale social forces on the way you and I behave in the one-on-one scale, okay? So this is a micro level perspective, but they are not blind to social structure, right? So think back to the very first day of this unit where I had that beautiful award-winning picture on the board with all of those circles linked together, and it started with macro scale over here and went to micro scale over here, right? Those links were in those circles I drew. I tried to make it look like a chain, because micro scale happens on the you and me level, but it is never without the macro scale connection, okay? So remember that. So you can still think about the American dream. You can still think about norms that exist on the macro scale from those social institutions, because it's the norms, it's the social facts that exist on the macro scale from those social institutions that build the statuses and roles that we have to occupy. And then on the micro scale, with our social groups, we live out those statuses and roles. Okay? Now, when we talk about deviance and the microscale, one of the first things that sociologists look at is they look at this topic from chapter 3, socialization. You thought you were finished with chapter 3, but here we are talking about this topic again. Socialization. Who remembers the key points that have to do with this process? Somebody help me construct a good definition of this really quick so it's fresh on our minds. What's the social? The socialization is a learning process. It sounds like y'all practiced this before class today to say it in unison. So the socialization is a learning process. So what do we learn in our socialization process, and how long does that learning process take? It's lifelong, and what do we learn? What do we learn? Oh, this is a good activity that we're doing here because we have to remember this. Socialization is most definitely lifelong, forgot the first part of that word, a lifelong learning process, and we learn our everyday behaviors from the everyday behaviors we observe others doing around us and we participate in with others, okay? So it's lifelong learning. We learn behaviors of our immediate social group, okay? We learn behaviors of our immediate social group. So here I have written this, it's a P, I've written this definition, or these key points of this definition, in a different way than I did with you in chapter 3 when we were first learning this. I don't think that I said, maybe I said social group in the definition that we got back in chapter 3. I'm definitely going to use this word now, if I haven't already, because this is one of the key terms from chapter 4, which is the first chapter in this unit, where we talk about how social structure affects behavior in daily life. Social structure on the macro scale trickles down all the way to the micro scale, and in our socialization process, we learn behaviors from people who we are around every single day. We learned in chapter 4 that the people we are around every single day are members of our social groups. How many types of social groups did we learn about in chapter 4? We learned specifically in chapter 4, it was 2, but yes, there are, when you get into chapter 5 and look at in-groups and out-groups and reference groups, there are more adjectives that go in front of the word group, but specifically in chapter 4, we learned about primary groups and we learned about secondary groups. Primary groups are called primary groups. Why? They are the main ones you hang out with, but why do we use the word primary for a primary group? They're the first ones they're in contact with, but I'm sure you have this in your notes if you want to flip back, and the test is open notes. So when I ask you, what'd you say?
Most significant for our socialization.
That's right, Veronica got it. This word, see how I sneaked that word into our discussion back when we were talking about social groups? Primary, we use that word in sociology to distinguish groups primary from secondary, because our primary groups, and I heard y'all mention family, they're the ones we are around the most, they're the ones we are around with every day. You could maybe even say we have expressive bonds with these folks, so it's important to us how they feel about us. In our socialization process, we learn from the people who we are around the most every single day, okay? So that's what the immediate social group means. Our primary groups are the people, like Kennedy said, we're around them the most. We're around them first. They got their hands on us first. If socialization, we learn behaviors through hanging out with folks, interacting with folks, observing folks, then what behaviors are we going to learn? The behaviors they're doing, right? Okay, so keep that in mind, because when symbolic interactionists talk about deviant behavior, they suggest, and tell me what you think about this, they suggest that if the people we hang out with every single day behave in ways that society on the macro scale defines as deviant, then what kind of behavior are they going to learn? Deviant behavior. That was an easy, she's shrugging her shoulders because that was like an easy question. Yes, correct. That's what symbolic interactionist suggests happens. So if we hang out with people whose society, according to the, what's happening? Are you serious?
Yeah, I didn't want to make a scene with you. I went under the table somewhere, so
I am sorry. Oh, I see it. I'm going to get over there. No, I see it. That's not a roach.
I don't know what it is.
It's flat now. I'm going to leave it right there.
Thank you.
Okay. Drama. Wow. Sorry, online students. Sorry, face-to-face students. Apparently, we still have.
There was this girl that she takes her online
This is
class.
deviant, right? It's deviant to have an infestation in your classroom.
There was this girl that has like your online class. And
Yeah.
She was like, "Was there another bug in your classroom?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, I think that a couple of my students told me in that day, I haven't gotten to the closed captioning yet to fix the closed captioning because YouTube does it for you, but YouTube is not always correct on the closed captioning. Have you noticed that? So I have to go in and fix it, and I'm behind, I'm like 4 weeks behind of fixing all of those closed captions because apparently one of the videos, it says that there's a dog in the text, like, instead of a bug, instead of the word bug, YouTube wrote dog. So anyway, can't help it. I'll fix it soon. Okay, so that was like squirrel, right? So I'm trying to remember exactly where we were in that thought process, but let me just dive in and guess where we were. I think I was about to draw the norms picture, my famous norms picture that I'm sure y'all love. So here's the gray area of behavior that doesn't really exist in the particular society that we are talking about. So we don't know whether behavior in here would be considered deviant or would be considered okay. So on this side, we can think of this as unacceptable behavior and inappropriate. And on this side, we can think of it as acceptable behavior and appropriate behavior. So this is the range of behaviors that society on the macro scale says is okay. So if you are here and your subculture is there, if you are there, your subculture is there, your immediate social group is here and there, to each other, y'all would probably say, I'm different than you, right? What was that, Veronica?
I think I feel it.
Where did it come from?
I don't
Is the one that you
table.
seen over there, was it
It's flat. It's still flat. It's still flat. Okay. What is going on here? They told me they did, and it smelled like it. I'm just going to buy some and do it myself. Okay, sorry. This is like the most interrupted. Yeah. No, I saw that one. That one looked like a mouse. It was so big. Okay, all right. Composure, getting it. Okay, sorry. So back to this. So both of these two social groups are considered normal according to social definitions. Are y'all okay? Everybody's like looking at the floor now.
I see crumbs down there.
See crumbs? Uh-oh. Don't you be leaving your crumbs over there. Okay. Okay. So both of these groups would be considered acceptable from a social scale, but on a micro scale, these groups might not like each other. These groups might not think that, to them, this group might not be okay, and to them, this group might not be okay, because they're so far apart. But from a social macro scale point of view, think about this big circle I have around here as like the global scale. Both of these different ways of being, both of these different social group behavior sets are okay from a macro scale. But what if your social group, from a macro scale perspective, is way over here? What are you going to learn as a little baby not knowing anything from birth on up through adulthood and through death?
You don't learn unacceptable stuff anymore.
You're-
Seeing unacceptable.
Exactly, very well put. You're going to learn this socially unacceptable stuff, but it won't seem socially unacceptable to you. Why? Why is that correct, what she said? It won't seem socially unacceptable to you. Why?
That's all you know.
Because that's all you know. These are the people that you're around every day, and they seem normal to you. They are, quote, normal to you, because you see them every day, but from a macro scale social definition of acceptable, appropriate ways of life, acceptable, appropriate behavior sets, you don't fit the macro scale definitions of acceptable, appropriate behavior. You fit over here. So symbolic interactionists often suggest, and what do you think? Do you agree with them? That people can learn deviant behavior simply by the social groups that they inherit in their lifetime.
Is that like the
Okay, yeah, we have phrases that we, like birds of a feather flock together. I'm not sure if exactly that one is a good, I think you're on the right track there to even just look at like the language and the phrases that we have to kind of explain this casually. But yeah, this behavior over here is going to be foreign to you, just like this behavior is foreign to these folks, right? But that doesn't mean that these folks are deviant according to social standards. It just means that this group, this in-group, sees these people as an out-group, for instance, right? Okay, so, where's the music coming from? Okay. Alrighty, so what do you think? Do you think we can learn, do you think that some people, because of the primary group into which they are born or adopted, do you think that some people learn a way of life that for the rest of their lives they are going to be sort of on the fringes, sort of on the deviant side of social acceptability? Can we learn that in our microscale? Yes, no, maybe? Yes, you think so? Okay, so that's what symbolic interactionists, some symbolic interactionists suggest. And on this topic, let me erase this, and I want to point you to a couple of symbolic interactionist theories in Chapter 6 that really come from the premise of learning deviant behavior in the socialization process. Let me tell you, I don't know what page number it's on. Oh, I have it open. Okay, it's on page 163 in Chapter 6. These two theories begin there, the discussion. One of them is called Differential Association. And I want to compare that to another symbolic interactionist perspective that's on like the next couple of pages called social bond theory. So these two theories, you can stick the word theory on the end of this, these two theories are ideas about how one-on-one microscale social interaction can bring about deviant behavior or prevent deviant behavior. This one suggests that deviant behavior is learned through those we associate with, okay? So deviance is learned through those we hang out with or we associate with. That's what the word association is in this, is in the name of this here. Deviance is learned through those we associate with. I'm putting in a nutshell, really paraphrasing what differential association theory is all about. Compared to, this is another microscale theory about deviance, social bond theory, that really is the flip side, sort of this deviance is learned by those we associate with, where the fellow who came up with this idea, Travis Hershey is his name, he said that if we hang out with people, let me write something other than what I just said. If we hang out with conformists, what does a conformist mean? But what does conform mean? What does conform mean in comparison to deviant behavior? Another one of your vocab words that you can look up right now while I'm asking you that question. And tell me. Okay, thank you. If you conform to something, you follow social norms. The acceptable side of social norms is what the conformity would be, okay? So yes, so social bond theory essentially says if you hang out with conformists, then you are probably going to be a conformist yourself, okay? If you have bonds with those people, and those bonds of friendship or love or camaraderie, collegiality, whatever the bond is, if you have bonds with those folks who are conformists, you're more likely to be a conformist yourself. There's kind of 4 behaviors that go along with social bond theory, and one of them is attachment. So if we have attachment, or here's where the bonds come in. So when he's talking about attachment, if we have a bond of love, friendship, etc., all those different kinds of emotions I just mentioned, if we have a bond with people who conform to social norms, as we learned back in our socialization discussion, we learn from people we hang out with every day. If we have bonds with people who conform, probably mimicking that behavior so that they will be pleased with us and want us to still be around them, probably that's an important thing for us to do. So if we want to keep them happy because we have an attachment, then probably our behavior is going to mimic them. If they're conformists, we're going to be conformists. Okay? Also, it goes deeper than this. Commitment. Commitment is part to the norms of society. Commitment to the social norms of society is also part of this social bond theory. And again, this theory is not about how people do become deviant, but how we avoid it. Okay? So a commitment to that conformity, a belief that it is important to conform, belief that these social norms are correct, if we believe that, we have more of a motivation to follow them. If we hang out with folks who believe that social norms are correct, then they are more likely to be conformist. We are more likely to develop a commitment that social norms are important and we need to follow that. And also, another thing about this, the social part here, is that we have involvement. If we have involvement in socially approved of activities, we have involvement in socially approved of activities, we are more likely, according to this social bond theory, we are more likely to become conformists if we aren't already conformists. We are more likely to be conformists if the people we are attached to have involvement in socially approved of activities. The differential association theory, on the other hand, it says almost the exact opposite. I mean, the theorists who came up with and described differential association theory, they don't have this 1, 2, 3, 4 number of, describing these behaviors or these conditions that apply to differential association theory. But let's think about this on the flip side for just a second. If you are attached to folks in your personal life, expressive bonds, right? If you have emotional ties to people in your personal life who behave in deviant ways based on the Microscale definition of deviance, then probably your behavior on the flip side, instead of being attached to conformity, believing in the good side of norms, maybe you might think, you know what, social norms are stupid, they are for drones, or they've taken the wrong, what color pill have they swallowed, the blue pill or the red pill, right, in the Matrix? Social norms are just for the blue pill people. Was that the right color of pill? Was blue the one that you take if you follow the Matrix? I can't remember. Anyway, y'all will tell me, right? Put in the YouTube comments what pill it is. But anyway, you might justify your behavior like, what do they know? They're just fools. They just follow the rules without questioning them. If my attachment is to people who behave in a deviant way, probably their opinion of me is more important than society's opinion of me, so I might mimic their behavior. If I do not believe that the acceptable side of norms are correct, if I believe they're a waste of time, if I believe that they are just some kind of trick to control me, and I'm going to go my own way instead of the way society says to go, then I'm more likely to be deviant. If I am not involved in socially approved of activities, I've got more time on my hands to develop activities of my own that might not be socially approved of.
So would it be like the Hunger Games when she went against them? You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely movies like The Hunger Games or Divergent or those kinds of movies are about that one individual who stands up against the system, right?
So
Yeah.
that would be like that?
I guess you could argue that it is. Yeah, I think you could argue it is. I mean, I'm not sure which one you would say. Like in that particular
'Cause, I mean, I know she was
dystopian movie,
Following it and then
Yeah.
she went against them.
dystopian movies, the word dystopian, y'all know what that means? It means that it's like an unpleasant world that you live in. It's like utopia means it's perfect in every way and everybody's peaceful and happy, but dystopian means it's extremely oppressive, extremely horrible, and terrible, right? So those kinds of movies have a little bit of a twist because the society's norms are like against freedom, against liberty, and that's one of the reasons
Is
why
that where it comes from, Zootopia?
people, yes, do what?
I was thinking about Zootopia too.
Yes, utopia, yeah, is the opposite of that dystopia, yeah. Okay, so what do y'all think? Do y'all think that this is observable? I mean, we're not doing sociological research here, but probably you can think of those in-groups and out-groups from high school, right? The cliques that happened in high school. And were some people just sort of, in people's minds, deviant? And others were kind of given the benefit of the doubt because of people they associated with? In some cases, right? I see some heads shaking in the affirmative. So what do y'all think about these two approaches? And these are just two of the many microscale approaches to deviant behavior. That if we interact with people who are deviant, then we will at least be considered deviant by others, but probably adopt deviant behavior ourselves. Or if we're involved in all these things, attachment, belief that the norms are correct, that this can prevent us from going the deviant path. What do you think? Did your mama tell you it was this way?
Not that way, but in some type of way, like,
Yeah, so here's where you have those phrases you were talking about, like phrases of birds of a feather or something flock together. Yeah, so the next microscale theory that we're going to look at is called labeling theory, and it's about it's about how do we take messages, how do we get meaning from the people who we hang out with, from maybe even the clothes that we wear or our posture, or let's look at this picture that I brought with y'all for y'all to see really quick. I only brought 5 copies of it. Let me hand out just a few for every few people. Y'all don't need to look at it for very long because it's a quick thing that you can pass it around. Let me show here. So you pass yours that way, please, and you pass yours that way. Let me show online folks really quick what the picture is. Here's the picture, and you can pass it around. And so, symbols. Are tattoos symbols?
yes.
I think we've talked about them briefly in this class before. So, okay, I hope that picture is like centered on the camera. Anyway, so let me put it down. Everybody see? Oh yeah, sorry, Logan. Yeah, pass it around. Yeah, pass it around. Yes, this picture is is that a guy or a girl? First of all, I don't know if that's a guy or a girl. Is it a guy? I don't see any like stubble on the chin. No, but I mean you can kind of see. That's true. I mean I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a guy. We want to say. I can't tell from the photo either. I mean some of y'all might. Oops. Okay, yeah, make sure you pass it around so Kylie can see it. Kaylee, I mean.
Miss T, that's a blue
Okay. Okay, is there an Adam's apple? I didn't see it. Okay. Does it matter? Would it matter in... Well, first of all, like, why am I showing you this picture? What is your reaction to this picture? It doesn't make sense. Why?
It doesn't make sense
that guy would get
to
that.
them. It's certain people. It don't make sense. It's how you take it.
Yeah, I mean, are we reacting right now to this picture based on the macro scale influence of social norms and social facts on our ideas? Like, is it really us making this judgment call?
I mean, I don't care what someone does to their bodies, that's their body. But if you ask for my opinion.
Yeah, I am. I'm asking, yeah, I want y'all's opinion, but I want it also, like, from the context of sociology that we've learned.
It's like, well, that won't be acceptable if you try to get hired to a job. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
no one wants
that's
to
what the
hire
meme is
someone.
saying. You know, the meme is about, like, are you hiring today, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, tons of people have tattoos, right? Tons of people have tattoos. Tons of people have tattoos on their necks. So, would it matter? Like, if you were the boss or in your work areas, are people discriminated against? Are they considered deviant, in other words, if they have certain tattoos in certain places?
Yes.
So, is that, well, you said yes, so is that just? Is it fair? Is it?
I don't think it's fair because me personally, tattoos that don't really affect.
Well, I mean, this is a very different, the attitude that your generation has about tattoos is extremely different than the attitude my generation has about tattoos, and definitely my mama's generation has about tattoos, right? So,
As a teenager, if I get a tattoo, she'll cut it off.
oh wow, that's a friendly mother. I'll cut off a tattoo if you get a tattoo. Wow, that's something to sleep tight with, that knowledge. Anyway, so yeah, so tattoos have evolved in their symbolism and their meaning, right? And I've had, over the years, this picture is 20 years old. This picture is from a sociology activity book that was published more than 20 years ago. It was published back in the 90s, so this picture is more than 20 years old. So back in the 90s, when I was talking about this with students, this was shocking. This was so shocking. This was extremely deviant. This was foolish. You know, I'm being polite when I say things like foolish. You know, there was a whole lot of ethnocentrism. Can I use that word? Ethnocentrism about this person's choice to do this, right? Today, we have a whole lot of people with tattoos all over their bodies, all over huge portions of their bodies, necks included. But this message of this tattoo, what do you think about his job interview day and his impression management and his, you know,
It makes them look kind of like someone who wouldn't take their job too seriously.
yeah, does this person take a job seriously? Does this person take, like, what is this person's top priority in life?
Parties,
I don't
apparently.
think it's necessarily
the job, it just makes it look like they were a young kid who didn't think things out quickly, so they didn't think it out the long term. So I wouldn't necessarily, if I was her, I wouldn't
So
necessarily.
didn't think it out in the long term. He does look young to me. I mean, we don't have much to go on in that, just that close-up picture of that tattoo right here. But he does look young to me. He didn't think it through well. How could you maybe word it? Could you maybe analyze that photograph and the condition of that kid's neck with either one of these theories on the microscale? You could do it with the differential association theory. How? What do you think? So, in other words, do you think that this tattoo was by himself?
No, that's what I'm gonna say. He probably was his friends gonna say we were going on it. Like, let's all go get it.
He was probably
And they just probably his group of friends that he used to go party with 25 and that's what he was saying.
So I'm hearing a whole lot of discussion about how maybe it does say we will always party hard. It doesn't say when it's time to party, I'm gonna party hard. It says we will always party hard. So I wonder what other members of his clan got the same tattoo that day. I'm not sure, right? But exactly. Differential association theory suggests that not only do we learn deviance from the people that we are around, but if you want to incorporate this concept over here and the involvement in socially approved of activities, if we have a commitment to social norms, involvement in socially approved of activities, we are less likely to be deviant or do something like this. I think you said, what did you say? What is he thinking about in the future, right? Yeah, so to us, it might not be very important. We maybe are not going to judge others based on a tattoo, but does society? So that symbol that we interpret on the micro scale will be interpreted by society, and I doubt any of us will ever see this person as the chairman of the Federal Reserve or the senior senator from Arkansas or on the campaign trail for any kind of political position or a bank president or et cetera, right? These American dream kind of ideas. Did this person have the American dream on his mind that time? Probably not. So maybe these folks in that immediate social group didn't have that macro scale American dream on their minds either. What do you think? Before we move on to our last topic of the day, I've said several times when I've pointed to this number 4, involvement over here, that if we are involved in socially approved of activities, we're less likely to behave in deviant ways, and we are more likely to conform, like our conformist friends. But what would you qualify as a socially approved of activity?
Well,
What do I mean by that?
some people might consider going to a party a socially acceptable activity.
Oh, sure. Do you agree? I think going to parties is a socially approved of activity, right? Going to parties would be okay, but what other kinds of things, especially in our early socialization process, our early upbringing, what kinds of things are considered socially acceptable for children who are not being trained to be children when they grow up, but they are being trained to be adults when they grow up? What are some of the socially approved of activities that kind of individual should or would be a part of? Okay, so before school age, playing those role-playing games like we talked about in Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Role-playing games. I'm going to play nurse because Dad's a nurse and I'm going to play it too. Or I'm going to play house because I live in a house with a family and I'm going to play that too. Right? So those learning activities where we learn those socially acceptable statuses and roles and how they live out on microscale daily life, those games that we play could definitely be considered socially approved of activities. Buying a little child toys like a toy vacuum or a toy, you've seen those little toy vacuums and toy shopping carts and toy this and that that are actually like big person things, but we train you in the socialization process to use those early. What else would a socially approved of activity be?
Sports.
Organized sports. That was one of them that was top on my mind. Participating in sports. There's a socially approved of activity. And it's after school that typically you have to do these kinds of things, right? So if you're in school, there's a socially approved of activity. If you're in sports, if you're in the band, if you're in this club or that club, if you go on field trips, if you have this interest or that interest, these are socially approved of activities typically that schools, that daycares, that boys clubs and girls clubs and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and these kinds of extracurricular activities usually are considered involvement in socially approved of activities. And so that's another thing that this social bond theory harps on is if you are engaged in activities that on a macro scale society approves of, you are probably in your socialization process going to be reared in the situation where you will be attached to conformists, believe that conforming to norms is important, and also be committed to doing that in your life and teaching others around you to do it in theirs. Is what the general idea is. Questions? Good? Okay. Interactionist theory about deviance. One more to talk about, very famous one, called labeling theory. Labeling theory. Some people who talk about stereotyping and talk about profiling and that kind of thing that happens in society, unfortunately. Some people look at this concept, labeling theory, and the microscale interaction that occurs when labeling of people goes on. And, you know, they place a great deal of importance on microscale interaction as a reflection of larger society's patterns. So I'm getting a little complicated here. Let me back up and just tell you what labeling theory is all about. Labeling theory is the idea that if authority figures, people in authority, like your teacher, like your principal, like your parents, like the coach on the team, any person who has authority over you, if they treat you as though they expect deviant behavior from you, then over time, you are likely to give them what they expect, essentially. So labeling theory, if authority figures treat you, or treat a person as though they are deviant, over time, that person will see themselves as a deviant individual too. Labeling theory. This also has some components of differential association theory and some components of social bond theory that we could link to the reasoning behind this particular idea here. So this particular idea, as you will read in your textbook if you haven't already done so, came from a guy named William Chambliss, and he was a microscale sociologist who was interested in the education system. He was interested in the way teachers and students interacted. And I think it was like in the 1970s, I can't remember when, it'll say that in your textbook. It was a long, long time ago where he did some observations in a high school. I think it was in Philadelphia or something. I don't remember again. You can read it in your textbook. But he noticed that the teachers in the teacher's lounge had names of cliques that were, the teachers were the only ones who knew these names of cliques. One of the names they called the Saints, or he called the Saints. He named them the Saints because that was not the word the teachers used. But essentially, there was a group of people who the teachers assumed were always doing right. They were always on the path toward success. They came from successful backgrounds. In other words, their primary groups followed social norms, were maybe known in the community. And so these high school kids who came from that kind of background, the teachers labeled as the saints. They could do no wrong. And on the flip side of this, William Chambliss called the other group the roughnecks. Not a common word anymore these days, but roughnecks is basically like a hood, another not common word anymore. A thug or, you know, somebody like that is basically what you should think of a roughneck as. What other word? What's a more modern word than even thug or hood or something? Y'all have a different word for me? Is that okay? Okay, that's fine. Okay, there we go. So anyway, so roughnecks was the name that he used in his study when he wrote about his observations. So the saints were the saints for those social reasons why the teachers categorized them or labeled them as okay. So the saints were not deviant in the eyes of their authority figures. They were not deviant in the eyes of the authority figures. The roughnecks, they were deviant in the eyes of their authority figures. Here's the interesting thing that this sociologist observed time after time after time. He observed that the people who the teachers classified as saints and the people who were classified as roughnecks, they always did the same behaviors. They always skipped class. They always broke the rules. They always did all of the same behaviors that high school students tend to do, even still today, 40 years after this study. But the difference was, and tell me whether you think that this happens, the difference was because of the attitude the authority figures, the teachers and the principals and folks, had about the saints, if a teacher caught one of the good people, looks like you're about to try to skip class, I know you must not be, you better get back there before you get in trouble, I don't want to see this again. That's how they would react to the saints if they saw them in the act of doing something or caught them after the fact. How could you do this? It's a terrible mark on your behavior. I know you didn't mean this. You could ruin your future. That kind of interaction happened. He noticed. And then the roughnecks, if they were caught in the act or about to do something, the assumption was they were guilty. The assumption was it was part of their social background. It was part of their behavior that you should expect because they're in this category. And they were the ones who got detention, who got suspension, who got expelled, who got all kinds of punishments, formal punishments, for the same behaviors that people were catching the saints doing all the time, but they just didn't get the same punishments. What do y'all think? Did y'all ever notice that happening in life?
About, like, when I was in high school, me and my friends, well, a lot of my best friends had like one classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and our teacher used to always call us the starters, and like she was talking about us like the security guards or other teachers. She like, yeah, they're my starters, because we was considered people who would like start the class
Who would
up to do
mm-hmm.
stuff. And like saying one of us was skipping or she seen one, it's one of my starters when you're going like.
Exactly. I know you're not trying to skip out on class because, yeah.
It kind of was like that, like the good kids in our class, they started some shit and like, shh, don't start that. And go out and do this, and we like, we're the starters, we'll get the top.
Okay, so different names. So different names for, the cliques, obviously. This was the names that William Chambliss used in his study. And these were not the names. I misspoke originally when I was telling you about this. These were not the names that the teachers used for these people. But essentially, he used these names to say, some people just could do no wrong, or when we did catch you doing wrong, it was like, how could you? Your parents would be ashamed, or you're going to ruin your scholarship chances, or I don't want to see this again, this is not like you, would be the response. Maybe stern, maybe a talking to, I just waved my finger, maybe they got that. But they didn't get suspension, they didn't get detention, they didn't get expelled, they didn't get grades off or whatever, zeros on work or whatever that they couldn't make up that wouldn't, contribute to their future success. Whereas the roughnecks, on the flip side, were doing all the same stuff according to his observations. All the same stuff. But like you said, the roughnecks would get punished, whereas the saints would be like, shh, just don't do it. And that would be pretty much the correction that they would get. So in labeling theory, there is something associated with this because, another sociology topic associated with this, because if a person treats you, if a person treats another individual with expectations, whether those expectations are real or imaginary, there is this phenomenon that we can observe on the microscale called a self-fulfilling prophecy. A self-fulfilling prophecy.
What is that word after deviant?
Over time.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So self-fulfilling prophecy. Have you heard this phrase before? What does it mean to you?
Something's been said over and over and over again that just like, yeah, might as well. So
Yeah, over time, if you're told, or you can tell, and you don't even have to be told openly, do you? Because you can tell by somebody's body language, right, what their attitude is about you. So you don't even have to be told openly, you're bad, you're just bad, I just knew you were bad. Like, it doesn't have to be even that direct. So the self-fulfilling prophecy is, yeah, over time, if you're told this or you get this message often enough that this low expectation is what this person has of me, what are you likely to do?
Do it towards them though.
Just give them what they want, right? And I heard you say towards them though. Yes. However, can we get conditioned to expect that if one authority figure has this attitude toward us, that other authority figures might be likely to have that attitude too? And then on the flip side, can our behavior also reflect what we expect their expectation is going to be? Does that make sense? Yeah, so regarding the self-fulfilling prophecy, we get messages from, sometimes they are in-your-face messages, direct words, you're bad, over and over and over again. Other times, they're more subtle than that. Most of the time, it's more subtle than that, where people's expectations are obvious to you, or you look at their behavior and you get meaning from their behavior, like they don't approve of me. They don't expect much of me. And you can take on that meaning and internalize it. And so when you're with that authority figure, you give them what they want. But what my question is whether that experience from your authority figures early on, can you internalize that so that now you've met a new authority figure, but historically all your authority figures have thought this of you, so can your nonverbal cues, can your language and your behavior with others bring about that attitude that you're just no good? Because you've been told that so much in the past that it's now part of the way you interact with people, with this expectation like, well, here's somebody new, but they're probably going to think I'm no good either, or two, or whatever. And so that's when it becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy, where you take on the expectations that you get from others, from interaction with others. You take on that expectation and make it part of your routine, part of your behavior. Yes, ma'am.
just thinking of, I know it's a trend, like especially in small town areas where you'll have multiple siblings. So one teacher, like you have an 8th grade teacher, and they have the older brother. The older
Multiple
brother
siblings in a small town, yeah.
acting up. So the older brother who constantly yell at him to be quiet, sit down. You get another brother who's like, it's just another one of those Smiths.
Another one of those Smiths who's going to act the same way. Yes. So
That might have been a good kid, but now you've been just what like as a bad kid, so now you know.
there we go. So that's a really good way to link labeling theory with differential association, right? So, okay, so the example, I'll just repeat a little bit of it because I'm sure your voice didn't come across the video. But yeah, what if you come from a tiny town and one person in a lot of siblings is the bad seed or whatever, I'm paraphrasing what you said, but that means that the next time another sibling comes into that person's classroom, for instance, it's just, oh no, another one of these people, they're going to behave in this way because that stereotype is placed on you, labeled, right? And so that's the same thing.
That happened to my husband when he was like in Honduras. Like he was like his brother was the bad rebellion one.
Mm-hmm.
So when he came, he was really smart. And
So
stuff,
see
and
that immediate
he
social
thought you were
group.
just like your brother, this and that.
That immediate social group can really affect all of this. That's where the microscale comes in. Microscale comes in. Yes, sir.
What time does class lay down?
10:40.
I've got a projector.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that those are good examples. And when you started your scenario about a big family in a tiny town, I was like, she's talking about my life, because yeah, that's exactly the experience that we had growing up, and I know a lot of y'all have had that experience too. Okay, so what do y'all think? Can we learn deviant behavior in society? and we won't know that it's deviant behavior, just like that little girl who she could cuss up a storm. She just knew every way to cuss, every way to Sunday to cuss. But she didn't know, because she learned that from her immediate social group. But on the macro scale, was that socially acceptable? No. And so she had kind of an uphill battle, because she inherited the social structure that she was born into. She inherited that social structure, but she learned from those around her immediately that different ways of being than what her social structure accepted. And so, yeah, people who learn the deviant behavior side of society have a harder time achieving that American dream in life, because of this, right? As one example, right? This as just one example. Okay, any questions? So when I get finished with my next class today, like I told you, I'm going to put the essay questions with the test and make it live. You will get a notification that it's up there for you. Please access it right away and have a look at it, even if you don't have time to sit down and answer any of the questions. Because if you have any questions that I need to answer, I'm going to need you to contact me right away, because I can't respond to all of you at once if it's the time, if it's the time the test is going to shut off. So please look at that, save your progress, and don't hit submit until you know you're ready to submit, okay? See you soon. We will start our next unit, really fun unit about social stratification. We'll start that next week.